After 2.5 years, the mother didn't come back for him. In May of 1907, he was put on a train to Louisiana.
It came with a little trunk, a little briefcase of some kind, with a little bit of clothing and shoes.
They took all this off and they dressed me up nice to take my picture when I got here.
You can still hear the trains as they pass through the small town of Opelousas. A century ago, there were a few special trains that stopped here. The trains had a precious cargo of young passengers. They were orphans who had been in the care of the Sisters of Charity at the Foundling Hospital in New York City.
Since it was a Catholic institution, they appealed to the Catholic parishes, like in Southwest Louisiana, it's mostly predominantly Catholic communities.
Lucien LaPerry's father, Frank, was 3 years old when he arrived in Opelousas with dozens of other New York orphans in 1907.
Just think of how many of us would not be here today if it wouldn't have been for the orphan trains.
The local Catholic priest, Father John Engberink, recruited families and even hand-carried their requests to the orphanage in New York. This one from a Doucette family asks for a 3-year-old child, preferably with black hair and black eyes. The sisters would give the parents a receipt telling them when the child would arrive. Each child had a numbered tag that helped identify them.
It didn't work quite that well. Apparently it was kind of a bedlam situation there when the children arrived.
Harold Dupre founded the Orphan Train Society of Louisiana. The group has just opened a museum in an old freight depot in downtown Opelousas. Dupre's father was also 3 years old when he arrived in 1907. Little George Thompson traveled with his 6-year-old sister, Agnes.
You have to realize that back in 1907, most people spoke only French here.
It was that language barrier that separated the young siblings.
The wrong George Murphy, wound up going with the parents of Agnes Thompson. And she kept telling them all along, you have the wrong George.
The brother and sister would grow up in separate families.
Agnes tells a story about the time that she went to a church in Grand Prairie, Louisiana, and she saw him. And she says she went up to him to talk to him, and he ran away.
More than 60 years passed before family members made the connection and reunited the long-separated brother and sister.
When I got them together in the 1970s, they looked at each other. They both had blue eyes. They both had reddish hair. They looked so much alike.
Dupre says his father didn't remember the train ride, but Agnes had vivid memories.
And she says, they had to drag me to the train. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in my home. This was their home.
During the decades that the orphan trains were leaving New York City with their young passengers, 250,000 children would find new homes all across the United States. 2,000 of those orphans would find their new families here in Louisiana.
The trains made stops in New Orleans, Morgan City, Lafayette, Opelousas, and Mansoura. In 1919, a 3-year-old named Alice Kearns was on one of those trains.
I was told that the people who picked me up, they said they had put me to bed between them at night, and I had shook all night long. I shook all night long from riding that train, I guess, and not knowing where I was going or who I was with.
At age 93, Alice Kearns Bernard doesn't recall the train ride, but has a faint memory of the New York orphanage.
The only thing that I think I remember, it might have been a dream, but it was a row of white baby beds, you know.
Bernard still has the clothes she was wearing when she arrived, including a pair of tattered brown shoes.
I had a name tag on the bottom of my little dress. I was addressed to these people because they had ordered me through the Catholic priest to come to them. I was sent like a package.
Many of the adopted families and their children didn't talk about the orphans or their train rides to Louisiana. But now, thanks to the efforts of their descendants, their stories are finally being told. With the heart of Louisiana, I'm Dave McNamara, Fox 8 News.